Now, can you hear me? Yeah. Okay, great. This is a sound check. The rabbi should be here any minute now. He's running a few minutes late. Um, Also, if anyone wants to join our Spanish classes at 9 o'clock on Sundays, we have a Spanish class also at 8:30 p.m. We have a Spanish class at 9. At 9, the class is on Kitzur Shulchan Aruch in Spanish, and at 8:30, it's on To Be a Jew in Spanish, on the Spanish version of the book To Be a Jew, Ser Judío. Right? Okay, we have like 10 people online now, not including me and somebody else. Okay, great. How's everyone feeling today? Good? Ready to learn? If anyone has any suggestions on classes, other classes you would want us to give, see, like the Rabbi Kalikowski, he's an expert in Kabbalah. He's really an expert in everything, but that's because he's a Hasidic Jew. His specialty is more the mystical aspects of Judaism, while I tend to be more rational or try to be rational. Let me see. Okay, but if anyone has suggestions, just ask the rabbi when he comes on. You know, like if he could give it. And I mean, he offered himself to give classes daily, so we just have to find on what classes he's going to be teaching. Also, we're going to start classes on Tuesdays with Rabbi Eidenson on the Noid laws. Obviously, Radio Torah is an open platform for all different Jewish ideas. So even though you guys probably know my opinion on the Noid laws, um, everyone's free to teach whatever class they want. For those who opt out and rather live a life according to the laws of Noah than the 613 laws of Judaism. Okay. Okay. All right. Yeah. So just give him like 1 or 2 minutes, and he should be here. Okay. One second. We're still waiting. He called me. He's on his way. But if anyone wants to ask me any questions on what I do, I just came out with the video last night. Kind of a controversial video. It's never been done before. But the concept is as old as Mount Sinai. And I won't tell you what the name of the class is, but if anyone wants to ask me about it or even put the name of the class up, you're free to do so. Let's see. There was a question about what you believe on Noahites. Hold on, let me catch my breath. Okay, the 7 Noahide laws, the bare minimum that humanity should aspire to. We should encourage everyone to at least keep the 7 laws of Noah. There's someone who posted a comment on my video yesterday. It's an interesting comment. He said the Noahide laws are for the Bronze Age. Right? It's an interesting concept. Why? Because people teach that nowadays Christianity and even Islam, by different opinions in Judaism, fall under the categories of the Noahide laws, with the exception that they don't put all the authority of religion on the feet of the Jews, right? I mean, they feel they're right and they feel the Jews are wrong, but at least on practitionary law, Islam and Christianity does apply. Islam according to the Rambam, Christianity according to the Ramon, the Miri, and right. So nowadays, well, also there's probably a concept you guys never heard in Bava Kama in the Gemara. It says that God abolished the Noahide laws. It says because people weren't keeping it, they were abolished, and really the only standard, the only standard someone has now, or the only option, is to be Jewish. That's one opinion, but there's many different opinions in the Gemara on this. And that's obviously not an opinion that we hold by today, even though it's there, you know. So, it's funny whether we hold by it or not. If it's a historical fact, at least from a theological perspective, if God did abolish it, whether we hold by it or not, it's still binding. But I think that there's nothing wrong with keeping the 7 Noahide laws. But I think, why keep the 7 Noahide laws when you could be a Jew? Just like if someone has a son or daughter who wants to go into the medical field, we don't encourage that person to be a nurse, although there's nothing wrong with being a nurse. We encourage that person to reach the highest they could reach, which is why we tell them be a doctor. Okay, fine, you can be a doctor, be a nurse, or be a whatever. You know, you can be a surgeon, be a general practitioner, doctor. If I'm not sure, like, if being in general practice is worse than being a surgeon or less than being a surgeon. Some people in general practice are also surgeons. I'm not sure. But once we care about someone, we tell them to aspire to the highest they could. And then, if they can't, we tell them to embrace the 7 Noahide laws. And really, that's how the Rambam brings down how we offer the laws to a Canaanite slave, right? First, we try to convert him to Judaism. Why? Because Canaanite slaves were also converted to Judaism, right? Was it a quasi-conversion? Was it a conversion that they would keep only commandments that pertain to women? That's debatable, but okay. And then the Rambam says if he refuses to convert to Judaism, then you offer him the Noahide laws. And then if he refuses to adhere to the Noahide laws, then, okay, he's liable to death penalty. Okay, so even the Rambam brings conversion before the 7 Noahide laws. But let's see, it's a start at least. Oh, sure, absolutely. Well, that's the thing. It's a start at least. I'm pretty sure before you even heard of the concept of the 7 Noahide laws, you were keeping them. Why? Just like that person who wrote on my video yesterday. It was really set up for people in the Bronze Age, people who didn't understand or grasp the concept of one God. But once, especially nowadays, almost no one, 99% of humanity does not have an excuse to walk around thinking it's okay to murder and it's okay to steal. Why? Because it's been ingrained. Even the Rambam brings down that was pretty much what Jesus accomplished. He brought the world to the idea of one God. Jesus, in the sense that Islam also came from Christianity. So it's a start. I don't know. I'm sure you had it before you even knew it existed. Just because, even as a Christian or a Muslim, you keep more laws than the 7 laws, right? And I think I remember who said this. Yeah, I'm pretty sure Rashi brought it down that a Noahide is not limited by 7 laws. He could add as many laws as he wants to it. And that includes keeping Shabbos fully, Tachar Mishpacha. Why? Because the laws bring life. Keeping the law is a good thing. The law is not an end unto themselves, but a means to a greater end. So that's a problem that many people have nowadays, that they keep the law just like it's almost like a spiritual Rubik's Cube with God. If you keep this and that, then for some reason God's happy and he won't kill you. It's almost like a pagan concept of God. While at least keeping... Oh, hold on. I think the rabbi may be here. One second. Okay. Yeah, false call. He's still on his way. Okay, the video he has made called Performing Commercials on YouTube and on Facebook channel. All right. Well, anyways, some people keep the law like it's some sort of spiritual Rubik's Cube with God, right? Why? Because we've detached the concept of doing mitzvahs with the result of anything good being actually accomplished in the world. To the point that if we teach anything good accomplished in the world, we say it's done in a spiritual fashion. That's why some people have adopted the belief that by putting on tefillin in a locked room, you're slowly sort of feeding people in Africa, or they've detached the actual act of the mitzvah with its result that really in the physical manner is what makes the world a better place, not in a spiritual manner, right? It's really with the introduction of the Kabbalah and Lurianic Judaism and the Zohar that these concepts have taken hold. That's why I'm not a big fan of the Kabbalah. I understand that before the Kabbalah, or before the Zohar was introduced by Rabbi Moses de Leon in the 13th century, the Gemara itself, the Talmud, has a mystical aspect to it. Books like Sefer Yetzirah, books that claim to be written by Avraham Avinu, all these things existed. But nowadays, we see in the news people like Madonna and Demi Moore hopping into Kabbalah because they want that quick fix when they really can't even read the Aleph base. So, so this is back to the concept that... Oh, hold on. Wait, the rabbi's here. Okay. Yeah, I was filling in for you for a second. Yes. Okay. Go ahead.
Where's this text?
Oh, here's the book. Oops. Sorry. I was keeping them entertained.
Where were we up to last time? Yeah. A second. Shalom Aleichem, Bruchim Abayim, welcome everyone. So we're on page 9 in the book. And, I want to thank you for coming. I'm sorry I'm a little late. I hope you forgive me. I don't think I'll be around next week. Excuse me. Second, I think some people are confused about where we're at. Oh wow, even I have a commercial now. Alright, it'll be 15 seconds before my advertisement ends. Okay, so at the bottom of page 9 we have the poetic description of the Jewish people as a river in the ocean. It says, in the severe droughts that never fails, and the mightiest floods it never overflows. The Gulf of Mexico is its fountain, and the mouth is in the Arctic seas. Is the Gulf Stream. There's no other such majestic flow of waters. Its current is more rapid than the Mississippi or the Amazon, and its volume more than 1,000 times greater. Its waters as far out from the Gulf of the Carolina coasts are indigo blue. They are so distinctly marked that their line of junction with the common seawater can be traced by the eye. Often one half of a vessel may be perceived floating in the Gulf Stream water, while the other half is in the common water of the sea. So sharp is the line, and such the want of affinity between those waters, and such to the reluctance, so to speak, on the part of those of the Gulf Stream, on page 10, to mingle with the common waters of the sea. Excuse me. Excuse me. This curious phenomenon in the physical world has a counterpart in the moral. Yeah.
I'm just saying it's kind of low. I'm just gonna double check here. Okay, here, just put it a little closer.
Okay.
Closer so you don't forget.
So it says, this curious phenomenon in the physical world has its counterpart in the moral. There's a lonely river in the midst of the ocean of mankind. The mightiest floods of human temptation have never caused it to overflow, and the fiercest fires of human cruelty, though 7 times heated in the furnace of religious bigotry, have never caused it to dry up, although its waves for 2,000 years have rolled crimson with the blood of its martyrs. Its fountain is in the grey dawn of the world's history, and its mouth somewhere in the shadows of eternity. It too refuses to mingle with the surrounding waves. The lines which divide its restless billows from the common waters of humanity are also plainly visible to the eye. It is the Jewish people. Well, I guess it doesn't say here who's saying this. It reminds me very much of how the prophets called Israel. Compares us to the olive, and compares us to the vineyard and so forth. All of these things which don't mingle so easily with other things. The parsha we read yesterday in the synagogues was Parshas Vayishlach, and in the beginning, Jacob, he sends a message to Esau, saying, "Im Lavan garti ve'echer adata." I lived with Laban, and I tarried there. I sojourned with Laban. I tarried there until now. Rashi says, "Im Lavan garti," that the word garti is the same gematria as Taryag, 613. Excuse me. Which means, Im Lavan garti v'seyarag mitzvos shemarti. I lived with Laban, and I kept the 613 commandments. The Satmar Rebbe, Schus Yegein Aleinu Al Kol Yisrael Amen, he quoted there his great-great-grandfather, the Yismach Moshe, the Ula Rebbe, and he wrote a commentary in the Psalms called the Tefillah LeMoshe. That's the commentary that the Yismach Moshe wrote in the Psalms, on the Sefer Tehillim. There he talks about different Psalms. So we have one of the Psalms comparing the Jewish people to olive, Zayis, Reinan. So the idea of the Jewish people being like the olive, he says it comes out here. Because it's a big question. Esau, why are we having Esau? Why would Esau care if Jacob kept the Torah? What difference does it make? He kept the Torah. So the answer is that it's like this. There are two ways the Jewish people are compared to an olive. One thing is that the olive, in order to get its oil, you have to crush it. And then when you crush it, the oil comes out. And then the other way that we get the oil is the other thing about oils, it stays separate from everything else. So the Yismach Moshe says in Tefillah Moshe that if the Jewish people stay separate from the evil of the world, then they won't need to be compared to the other way that the olive comes, which comes from crushing. This means that so that's why Jacob said to Esau, good morning. That's why Jacob said to Esau, I kept the 613 commandments, so you don't have to crush me, because I kept the Torah, because if we keep the Torah, we don't need the persecution. Sometimes it happens anyway, but we don't need it. Now that's a good point. A lot of observant Jews were crushed in the Holocaust, and that's what I'm saying. Sometimes it happens even when we don't need it. They say though that before Rebbe Elchanan Wasserman, Zchus Yigein Aleinu Hashem Yinkom Damai, the great tzaddik, the Rosh Hashiva of Baranovich, who was murdered by the Nazis in the Holocaust. So as he was, him and all of his students, as they were about to be killed, he told his students that they should have pure thoughts because they were a sacrifice to atone for the sins of the Jewish people of their generation. And so they had to have pure thoughts, because the thoughts that a person has comes into to change when one's bringing a sacrifice from the animals. So the same thing, have to be careful the thoughts that they were thinking when they were giving their lives for the Al Kiddush Hashem. The next thing Rabbi Dolan speaks about is that despite the small the small amount that the Jewish people are, our small population, and also our unique identity, we still always reached out to, to the whole world. He quotes here Ernest van de Haag, who says, Jews have witnessed and taken part in more of the human career. They've recorded more of it, shaped more of it, originated and developed more of it, above all, suffered more of it than any other people. So, the history of the Jews basically was a history of interaction with the rest of the world. So generally, he's saying here to the Western scholars who have, more Christian worldview, see the Jews in a condescending way. Textbooks of history, sociology, or philosophy rarely have anything significant to say about the Jewish people or Jewish thought after the beginning of the Christian era. And this is even true to this time. There's a very popular book on world religions written by Houston Smith. I believe he's still alive today, Professor Smith. And I remember when I was in high school, one of my the rabbis, Harav Moshe Weinberger Shlita, who's a big Rav in Long Island, he said that he reads the New York Times. He said now he doesn't read anymore. At that time, when he was teaching the high school, he would read the New York Times every day. And he said he knows that he can't trust anything that's in the that's in the New York Times. Why? Because he reads the article about Jews and he knows that it's not accurate for the most part. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. He knows it's not trustworthy. I'm not very sick, but thank you for your care. Amen. So he said he reads an article about Jews. It's not so so accurate. So similarly, if he's going to read an article about Buddhists or Hindus or Sikhs, whatever, it's also not going to be accurate. So, being Jewish, when I picked up Professor Houston Smith's book, Dr. Smith's book, I assumed that, the first thing I want to see is, what does it say about the Jews? So I read it, and it has this condescending view, basically, of the Jewish people. It wasn't, mostly seeing the Jewish people as, in the eyes of the Tanakh, what the Christians would call the Old Testament, and what we would call the Only Testament. Excuse me. And the and then after that, there's just very little, interesting. Particularly talking a book on world religion. There's so much beautiful religious things that we have today. There's a whole history that's that we have all the way through to today, and it mostly is focusing on the contribution that historically the Jewish religion is giving to the rest of the world, as opposed to the vibrant, living Jewish life there is today. And so I assumed the rest of the book is also not going to be too valuable. And I read the rest of the book and I learn a lot of interesting things. And I see that on the chapter about Judaism, maybe there's around 10 or less notes, sources. And then all the other religions, they have 20, 30, 40 sources. So I'm not sure that that it's that the same thing that Rabbi Weinberger said, that you can't trust these books, because if they don't say good about the Jews, how can, and we know about ourselves, so how do we know that they're also not accurate about other people? It seems like there's an extra prejudice against Jews and Judaism. And so Rabbi Donin treats this here on page 10. And he talks about this bias against Judaism and the Jews. He said it basically comes from the fact that most of Western academia that we have today, rooted in Christian roots, and at that time, the major, yes? You have a question? Okay. At that time, the major theological view, the major theological view that most of the Christian world has is what we call replacement theology. That which is the view which is based in the books that the Christians would call the New Testament. They say that they became the new Israel, basically. They replaced us. So that's basically the idea that has influenced so much of the Jewish of the non-Jewish approach to the Jewish people and to Judaism, that basically the value and the history of the Jewish people and Judaism is coming by from the Bible, and then after the Bible there's nothing. And this is a very sad thing, and it's most probably something that's basically coming from the Sahara, just from the side of evil, just to keep the Torah away from the world. Who knows? But what he said is that as Jews became secular, and they didn't know about Judaism, they also adopted this view, and we see this particularly in the Reform approach to Judaism classically, although in recent times things have changed. But the classic approach that Reform Judaism took was quite similar, not only in their form of worship, in their liturgy, to the way certain Christian churches may have approached. But even in their ideology of looking at the Jewish people through the eyes of basically our great contribution to the world was the Bible, and then after that it's kind of shady. But the truth is that the real light of the Torah is where the Bible is firmly connected to the oral traditions that God gave to Moses. God explained the Bible, and without that, we say that the Bible, what the real Bible, what the Christians call the Old Testament, and what we call the real Bible, the real Tanakh, that is a dead body without the soul of the Talmud, of the oral tradition. The only way that we can really understand the Bible is through the lens of the way the rabbis taught it, based on the oral traditions that Moses received on Mount Sinai. It's clear from the Bible that God gave to Moses more. We have sections where God says to Moses, for example, to make shechita, to do ritual slaughter according to the way I showed you. So what does it mean, the way I showed you? Doesn't say anywhere in the Bible. So obviously God told Moses more than what's in the Bible. The Bible is perfect in that all of that is hidden within it. But the foolishness that so many Christians have, particularly those from the Protestant view of sola scriptura, that you'll have a lot of Protestant ministers, they'll hold up their English translation of the Bible and say this is a perfect book, and they're missing the point. It's, first of all, any English translation that you have is not the Bible. The Bible is the original tongues. It's not an English translation. An English translation, by definition, is an oral tradition. Why? It's very simple. You go to study how to read Hebrew, and you have to go to a teacher to teach you how to read, or have some way. Now you could have video, or but someone had to put this together, a book, something. You had to have someone teaching you how to read. This is the way that our sages approach it. That someone came to Rabbi Akiva and said, "Teach me Torah." And so the first day he shows him, but he said, "I only want the written Torah and not the oral Torah." So Rabbi said, "Okay, come learn with me. We're going to learn how to read Hebrew so you could read. Otherwise, how can you read the Bible if you don't know the original language?" So he said, this letter is the letter Aleph, and this letter is the letter Beis, and this letter is the letter Gimel, and so forth, and that's what. Good. All right. This was our first lesson. Come back tomorrow. We'll learn again. Review this that we learned. You have your notes, and we'll come back. So then the next day, he points to the Beis and says, this is the letter Aleph. And he points to the letter Aleph, and this is the letter Beis, and so forth. And he said, wait a second. You told me this was the Aleph and this was the Beis, and now you told me this is the Aleph, this is the Beis? Ah. So you see why you need the oral tradition. Because how do you know which one's the Aleph and which one's the Beis? It gets even more than that. In the Bible itself. The Bible that we have, written, what we call the written Torah, has no vowels. If you know a little bit about Hebrew, The way we write Hebrew today, you have the letters, the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet. Some of them have different forms. And then we have dots and lines that we put underneath and next to it, on top of it, to be the vowels. And the vowels change the meaning of the word. And the only way we know the vowels is really by oral tradition. And we have many words that are spelled exactly the same way and totally change their meaning depending on which vowels you have. Now, most of them, if you go through and you look at the context and you actually know Hebrew, you can usually figure them out just by the context. But sometimes you'll have totally different terms, totally different words that are totally different with the same exact spelling, and only the vowels are different. Probably the best example of this, and the one that has the most, if you're trying to live the Torah as a real Torah, not just as a living way of life, you need to follow the halachas. So one of the words you have two words that are spelled exactly the same, and they're nouns that have totally different meanings. They might have some connection in theory, is that you have the word cholov, which is milk, and you have the word chelev, which is a particular type of fat. And the Torah says that it's prohibited to eat chelev. Chelev is a type of fat that you're prohibited to eat the chelev from a behemoth, from a domesticated animal. So meaning that you can eat chelev from a wild kosher animal like a deer or an antelope or a buffalo or a giraffe, and you can eat the chelev from a bird. But the domesticated kosher animal, a cow, a sheep, a goat, you're not allowed to eat these certain fats, the chelev. And it's very important that you have to take it from that it has to be removed. And some people, they don't even eat any meat from domesticated mammals because they're worried that maybe the chelev wasn't removed. It's in very, very pious communities. Most communities don't have this custom, but there are certain communities that do, and this is one of the major reasons. Now, anyway, the prohibition against eating chelev, it's an isser kares. It's spiritual excision. You're cutting off spiritually if you eat the chelev. It's the same thing as if you would eat leavened bread on Passover, chametz on Pesach, or you would eat on Yom Kippur, violating Yom Kippur. It's very serious sin to eat these portions, even from kosher animals. And that's what the Bible says. If you don't have an oral tradition, how do you know if it's chalav, milk, or chelev, fat? And then the other thing is, how do you know even, which fats are chelev and which ones are not? Also, different. There's shuman and chelev, and how do you know which is which? So every biblical translation that I've ever heard of, though, translates the word chelev properly as being fat, and no one translates it as chalav, milk. Excuse me. Well, maybe you could say, because we see that people did eat milk, and it's obvious that milk was kosher, but still, ultimately you need a tradition, oral tradition, to figure out which is chalav and which is chalev. And so too it is with all of the oral tradition, that the Bible without the oral tradition is not is not not any is nothing. And not only that, but it's contradictory. It's hypocritical for someone to read an English translation of the Bible and say that they do not believe in oral traditions, because by very definition, any translation of the Bible is an oral tradition. Now then, Rabbi Donin, he talks about this idea that even though the Jews have been persecuted, you know, we've made big contributions and everything. And really all of these things come on through to being part of the ideals of Judaism, to make the world a better place. Now, unfortunately, many Jews have taken the spirituality out of this great thing that we have, meaning it's rooted in the traditions that they remember, but it's lost the spirituality behind it. It's lost the idea that we're doing this for the sake of God, and that's one of the great tragedies of the Jewish people. Torah calls us Mat Mikol Ha'amim. He says here on page 11, we've always been called the fewest of all the nations, and yet we accomplish a great deal. Everyone knows this. The thing is that it's more than this. It's not only the accomplishments that we have accomplished in the secular world that have anything important, but it's the spirituality, it's the gifts of God. That's what's important. As it says in Genesis 28:14, through you and your descendants will all the families of the earth be blessed. In Deuteronomy 14:2, for you are a holy people unto the Lord your God, and you did God choose to be unto him a treasured people among all the peoples upon the face of the earth. Am Segula. Really, we don't have a term in the Bible of a chosen people. We do, although there is this term people use, Am Nivchar. It's not, I don't remember seeing this term anywhere in the Bible. The term Am Segula, a treasured people, that we have in the Bible. But Segula has a few connotations, not only as a treasure, but as a treasure that's a good spiritual omen to help and bring blessing, be a conduit of blessing. We talk in the Kabbalah, people looking for segulas, people looking for what you would call sometimes in English like a good luck charm. But it's not good luck. It's rather a conduit through which, through having faith in God and things to remind us of faith in God, that God's blessing sometimes comes to us in the world. And we cannot put any faith into the actual item itself. We have to put the faith into God. And so it's the same thing. The Jewish people are called in Deuteronomy 14:2 Am Segula, a people who are treasured, a people who are like a good luck charm, a Segula that we cannot put the faith into ourselves as an independent entity, but our job is only to remind ourselves and remind the world of Almighty God who controls the whole world. And so the Rabbi Donin says that the devout Jew accepts this status with humility and thanksgiving, seeing it as a yoke and a burden as well as a distinction. He sees himself as a servant of the Lord, ready to do his bidding at all times. And this takes many forms, dedicating time to studying Torah, keeping the mitzvahs, both the ritual and ethical mitzvahs, struggling for justice and righteousness in society. And a real learned and observant Jew ignores none of the ways. And then he talks about the dichotomy that that our own self, we are small and insignificant, but we have this cosmic significance in doing the bidding of Hashem. He then refers to, unfortunately, the heretics of our people. He says the skeptical Jew, on the other hand, does not see himself as a servant of God. He's embarrassed by these references. The thing is that many non-Jews talk about these things because we know the Bible says it. Even the Jew hears the non-Jew saying this, he might repudiate it. But history shows the opposite. Although it's very interesting, what I've seen firsthand is that generally the skeptical Jew, maybe he's not consciously skeptical, but only by virtue of, laziness or ignorance and so forth, which is probably the vast majority of the Jewish people. They don't get awakened when they hear someone Jewish telling them about their role as in the Torah. But when they hear a non-Jew, then they are impressed. A friend of mine in high school, he was a jeweler. His father had a jewelry store, and even though it's really not the right thing to do, so they were Jewish. And among the jewelry that they sold, they had Magen David, they had different things, all different, and they also had crosses. And he said that this boy said a Christian fellow walked into the store, and he said, he wanted to buy a cross. And he said, he saw that the boy was wearing a yarmulke, but he wasn't so into his Judaism. Just he wore a yarmulke, that's what he did. Or, I don't know, maybe he wasn't even wearing a yarmulke, but he had mezuzah on the door. It was somehow obvious he was Jewish. And he said that this non-Jewish fellow said to this Jewish boy, he said, I'm buying a cross because I grew up Christian, that's what I know. But I know that the truth is with you people. Now this boy would sit in yeshiva every day, not be so into it, this and that. Then he hears a non-Jew say to him, you people have the truth. You people have the true way to God. That impressed him. It woke him up out of his laziness, and he wanted to, devote more time to Torah, and it gave him more diligence in his study of Torah. Now the next thing that he says here is that all the nations and people of the world have a purpose in the world. And it's not just for the Jews. We see, that basically goes into this idea where it says that the Jewish people are a kingdom of priests. And so a priest who just serves himself has no purpose. The point of the priest is to serve other people. But also, generally, priesthood is not a closed thing. If someone wants to join this priesthood, they could also. But for sure, the Jewish people have no concept that everyone in the world should be Jewish, which is different than the two major religions that were born out of Judaism, Christianity and Islam. They both believe that everyone has to be the same as them, and for the most part, that whatever particular branch that anyone belongs to, that's what they should do. We don't have this idea. Now, it's not really true what Rabbi Donin is saying, that really the distinctive beliefs are, the ideal, meaning that it's not necessarily, for sure, when people have inherently evil ideas about God that cause people to do inherently evil things, there's really no tolerance for such an idea. However, we do have an idea, biblically speaking, although it's a little controversial, it's more of an idea of Musar in the book of Malachi. And it says, Malachi, the last prophet, is giving Musar, is admonishing the Jewish people. I can say the Jewish people because by that point in history the 10 tribes were gone. So it was really the Jewish people at that time. And he said, you guys, you know the truth. You have the Torah, the true word of the living God. But you're lacking. In their time, they were much more pious than us. Everything, of course, is on the level of where they're standing. So you're lacking the sincerity, you're lacking the feeling, you're lacking the ethics and morals, but you know the truth. And he said, from the rising of the sun to the setting of thereof, great is my name among the nations. In every altar, in every place, I am being worshipped, says the Lord. What does it mean? That when people worshiping idolatry, but they're honest people, good people, but they just don't know any better, God looks at their heart and accepts it to be worship of Him, even if it's misled and wrong. But the thing is that that's only someone they don't know any better. But our ideal is that everyone should know the truth about God, the way that the Torah teaches, and accept the basic values, the 7 laws of Noah. That's the first point, to serve as a blessing to all the families of the earth. But if someone has within themselves a greater desire, they can become a Jew, but they have to know they're not obligated to do so. And so, it says in Genesis 12:3, all the families of the earth will be blessed by the seed of Abraham. That we don't have only a parochial view. We have also an altruistic view, although truly we have that balance of both. And so, Rabbi Donin says on page 12 that we're waiting for the time when the world will be perfected under the reign of the Almighty, and all mankind will call upon thy name, as we say in the Aleinu prayer 3 times a day. That's the purpose of our existence. And that's the purpose of our suffering, our dispersion, and also the purpose for what we're waiting for, the coming of Mashiach, when we return to Zion, return to Eretz Yisrael. And it's a big problem today that we have been so misled to pervert this great ideal, which is really the purpose of what we're waiting for, Mashiach coming, is to bring the whole world, to serve the whole world, and to bring the light of God to the whole world. And that was the original purpose of Eretz Yisrael, because it was a place where everyone would pass through. Our friend Rabbi Asher points this out a lot. To receive the blessing and knowledge of God, and the love of God, and at least the basics of ethical monotheism. And if someone wants more, the opportunity for more. And unfortunately, to turn this the other way around, it's very sad. Whereas really the big purpose of Eretz Yisrael and the big purpose of Mashiach and everything is to serve the whole world. So we're waiting for that day. I want to say that this class has been dedicated by our good friend Jason Hurd in Texas, and we wish him and his whole family much blessing in the schus of learning Torah. At this time, we can take for a few minutes a few questions for the next 5 minutes. Okay. All right. If you have any questions, feel free to type it into the chat, and then at 12 minutes after, okay. So this is a great question. Why does halacha not permit embalming when Joseph was embalmed by his family in Bereshis 50:26, Genesis 50:26? So the answer is that Joseph really was not embalmed. This is what the Orach Chaim HaKodesh says, Rabbi Chaim ibn Attar. Says that really the Midrash tells us that Joseph, he was such a holy person. Jacob is said really didn't die. And Joseph also, he was so holy that at first there was the advertisements over. That Joseph, he was not his Jacob and Joseph, their bodies were not decomposing. So therefore, they were worried that the Egyptians would worship them as gods because they're seeing that their bodies were not decomposing because of their great holiness. So therefore, they only smeared on the outside some things on the outside of the body, but they did not go through the whole embalming process, particularly the Egyptian embalming process of mummification, where they removed the internal organs. That was not done to our patriarchs, but just on the outside they smeared some oils and things to make it appear that this was what was preserving them, when actually they were being preserved in a, I wouldn't even say supernatural way, you could say even almost a natural way, because it wasn't from their sins of it wasn't from their sins that they that would cause them to be decomposing. So really, they were not really embalmed according to the Orach Chaim Kodesh, and that seems to be the normative idea. The question about Noahites not having a portion fully in Olam Haba, the best way I can approach this in the very limited time we have, and maybe we can discuss more of this later at another time, is that Rabbi Victor Miller, Zecher Tzadik Levracha, who's a great tzaddik, passed away close to 10 years ago now, will be coming up 10 years ago, right after this coming Pesach. Rabbi Miller said that it's logical that a Kohen has a greater share in the world to come than a Levite or Yisrael. Why? Because he has more mitzvos. Meaning every mitzvah that you do is a more of an opportunity to have a greater share in Olam Haba. So I wouldn't say that the Noahide doesn't have a full portion in Olam Haba, but he has his full portion. But someone who has more mitzvahs obviously has more of a share. And so too, that's why if someone really cares about this type of spirituality and they feel it in their soul, they should put in the greatest effort they can to become a Jew, if that's what is in their heart. But the thing is that the portion that the Noahide has is very is very great, and so he was not going to. It's going to be greater than anything we could imagine in this world, but still, if you're looking for more, and the portion that the Jew has is much greater. Even that a mediocre Jew has a much greater portion than the greatest than the greatest Noahide. So it's not really an issue of full portion, but each person has their own full portion. It's like the Rebbe Reb Zushia from Manipoli. He said, "I'm not worried. They're going to ask me, why weren't you Moses and why weren't you Abraham? I'm going to be worried when they ask, why weren't you Zushia? Why weren't you who you could be?" But the thing is that the difference is, yes, between an Israelite and a Kohen and a Jew and a non-Jew, is the non-Jew has the choice, although it might be a tremendous amount of effort to do everything properly, but the non-Jew has the possibility of becoming a Jew, whereas the Israelite does not have the possibility of becoming a Levite or a Kohen. But that's the that is the difference between I would say in some sense the difference between the Noahides portion and the Israelites portion is similar conceptually, even if it's not quantitatively or qualitatively, to the difference between the Israelite and the Kohen. But the also that difference is that that this is the there was a question: why is kissing the Torah and praying at the graves of sages not considered idol worship? Answer is, first, kissing the Torah. It's that the same question you could ask: why isn't kissing your mother idol worship? Why isn't kissing your wife? Why isn't kissing your child idol worship? You can express love for something or someone without worshiping them. As far as the graves of the righteous, we're not praying to the tzaddikim. It's not my phone. We're not praying to the tzaddikim. We're praying to God in the merit of the tzaddikim. But it's possible to ask the tzaddikim to pray for you. And the reason for that is because our sages say that the righteous, even in their death, are really still alive. It's just like you can go to someone who's alive and ask them to pray for you. It's not really intercession in the sense that you need them to go for you, but it's in the sense that just like you can go and ask a living person to pray for you, you could ask a tzaddik who's not in this world, is really still in a sense alive, and they could pray for you. That's an idea, because but that's not idolatry, because it's just asking for someone to pray for you on your behalf, just like a living person. I once heard the present Satmar Rebbe, was before he was the Rebbe, one of the present Satmar Rebbes, Baron Teitelbaum, explained from the Noam Elimelech, what is this idea that the tzaddik who's passed on, why can his prayers help us in this world? It goes like this. We say that the reward for studying Torah in this world is you're going to study more Torah, meaning you study Torah in this world. When the Mashiach comes, when you're in Olam Haba, whatever, you're going to study more Torah. When you've prayed in this world, you're going to pray more to God. You're going to praise God in the next world. Just like the reward for praising God in this world is praising God in this next world. What if you're helping other people in this world? When you're in heaven, there's no one to help. Everybody has everything they need, so you can't help other people. So that's why God gives the gift to those who have passed on, that they are able, in a sense, to help people in this world, that God helps the people in this world who have the connection to those who have passed on. Those who have passed on can help those in this world. A non-Jew keeps the mitzvahs. We have an idea that our sages say, "Gadol mitzvah va'osei yoser min ein mitzvah va'osei." That there's a greater reward when you're obligated to do something than the reward that you have when you're not obligated. So even though the reward again will be tremendously great, it will not be as great as the reward for someone who is obligated. But if you accept the obligation yourself by converting, then the reward will be greater. As far as generally, we do pray for the deceased, that God should have mercy on their souls. Generally, we do not we do not we do not we generally, most people, we're not asking them to pray for us except for the great tzaddikim, but the but the we do pray for those who have passed on. Okay, there was a question about parva cheese with chicken. I usually not liking to answer the. I mean, the tzaddikim, there's advocates in this world and the next world. There's really not so much of a change from this world to the next world, except maybe their power becomes greater. I don't like to answer halachic questions, but basically what I would say is the chicken with the parva cheese, with the non-dairy cheese, is okay as long as you make it clear that it's non-dairy. If you keep the packaging out, then it's not the issue of what we would call maris ayin. When Mashiach comes, nobody knows. Certain things that our sages say hold it back, but we don't know when Mashiach is going to come. A mikveh is a very complicated thing to make. It's not just a big bath, not just putting some rainwater. It's a big, complicated thing to do. We have to, and now we don't have the time to explain how to make the mikveh. No one really who can't. It's not the river; it's the rainwater. But it's not just. But there's complicated laws about how the rainwater can go and what. And the thing is, also it has to be in the ground. It cannot be. There's all different kinds of rules about. Now, as far as this video that Asher made about converting yourself, I would only say that that's very b'diavad, and it's something that like he himself said, no one in America should do it because there's nothing legally prohibiting you from getting up and moving, even if it's very expensive. If you really care that much about being a Jew, you'll go through fire and water to get up and move to a community and do it the proper way, 100% kosher. This idea about and no matter, eventually, if you work hard enough, even if it takes a long time, you'll find someone and you do a real kosher conversion. To do this, converting yourself is very b'diavad, and even after you do it, before you can really become part of any Jewish community, you still have to do a proper conversion yourself. But theoretically, maybe, you're obligated from that point to keep the mitzvahs once you do that, but you're still not part of the Jewish community if someone would convert themselves. As far as what's approved by the Israeli rabbinate, that's not what I'm talking about, but following all the halachas, the Shulchan Aruch says, which lechatchila, which you have all these ideas in the let me say it like this: if a person is in a coma, they're alive, but they're alive b'diavad. And so, and if but if person, the person who's in a coma is just as much alive as the as the robust person who's an athlete. They're both just as much alive, but the one who's in a coma is alive b'di'evid, and the one who is alive l'chatchila is alive l'chatchila. Now, as far as you're saying going to New York for Basin, that's not a big problem. So you go to New York.